Exactly 50 years ago, something special started in Bowden, Alberta. Since then, the Alberta Conference Camp meeting has touched many lives. And this year, we'd like to go back to how it all began. With the very first theme we had at Foothills Camp. We invite you to the 2023 Alberta Conference Camp meeting. Come join us to celebrate 50 years of moving by His Spirit.
You came by, okay, come by, Doctor. Oh, we'll get something for you as well. And anyone else who hasn't missed out on that, please, we have something for you. So you kind of know the work of Adra. Essentially, Adra is, of course, our church's humanitarian arm and agency. It's your church's arm and agency. And I was saying, it was interesting, I made a plug-in here. And we got Doctor here from Berman. We have partnered with Berman to establish a joint certificate in humanitarian service worker training. We want you, as I said before, to take it back to your churches, promote it, tell your family members, tell your young people. We certainly want you to, avail yourself to this opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity for you to look into and get additional training, especially as you want to do more impact in the community. So today we're talking about community engagement and development. If you give me your email after, I will send you some tools. We have community mapping tools, we have community needs assessment, even a mental health assessment as well if you need those tools. So essentially what we're talking about is engagement in the community. And what does that mean? What does that look like? So you'll see a few examples here, and then if you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand. Feel free to just pipe in and chime in as we go forward, okay? So it's a big thing. Our church has been situated where they are so that they can be agents of change. Do you believe that? Yeah. Okay, so what happens to the church that just sits and nestles in the community and really does not make any inroad to impact the community? What happened to that church?
It will not grow.
Thank you. What else?
People only go there because it's the old church.
Yes, that's right. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
They will be neither cold nor warm.
Okay.
Nor hot.
Okay, you're preaching now. Revelation, okay. Yeah. It loses its danger zone. It loses its relevance, right? So if our churches are meant to be agents of change, transformational agents, then we need to know our community, and our community needs to know us. And so important. We talk about that, and we see this even happening right here in Alberta. Because we're here at this camp meeting, we see so many projects that were done. Even there are some local churches we talked about. We have our Adra conference representative and coordinator, Brother Enoch here. I've worked with him closely, and we've implemented many projects, right? And we visited many of those projects. We have projects in Red Deer, and even at Berman, we have this beautiful community garden. It's on the campus, but it's managed by the College Heights Church. And these are ways that we can engage with the community, connect with them, and then meet their needs where they are, and be able to let them know how much we care, but also how much we want to help them. So I'm not going to go through these preliminaries really quickly. These are just formalities. But I want to begin with a scripture. The best place to begin. A scriptural foundation. John chapter 4, verse 4. Can you all see that? Can we read that together? What does that say? And what? He must needs go through Samaria. It was necessary for him to go through Samaria. I put two versions there. And you've probably heard this scripture before. You've probably read this scripture before. But it's interesting how the gospel writer captures this. And this is John. So John the disciple. And he writes it with this emphasis. It was necessary, needs be for Jesus to go through Samaria. And you think about that, right? He could have taken a different route. He could have gone another way, a shortcut, a faster way. You know how we put in our address in our GPS? and it calculates and gives us the fastest way to get there, right? It'll tell you, okay, avoiding toll roads and avoiding the Samaritans and avoiding, right? So, but Jesus, the Bible says he was inspired to go through Samaria because there was needs in Samaria. And it was very important. So he was being led by the Spirit of God. And so the question is, why has God placed your church where it is? Why has God placed you where you are? We have to ask ourselves that question, because God didn't place us there just to twiddle our thumbs, to mark time. God placed us there on purpose, not by accident. Because God designs things in a way that will always bring honor and glory to Him if we are open and sensitive to His voice and His leading and calling in our lives. So let's keep going. So when we talk about community engagement, what are we looking at? So we have our church. Our church is a charitable organization. Adra is the church's humanitarian arm and agency, also a charitable organization known as an NGO, non-governmental organization. We have many entities in our church. And, you know, what is unique about our church is that we are so blessed as a church to have so much structure. We have our academic institutions, research, we have our medication, to our churches, to publishing houses, to hospitals, and then we have a humanitarian arm and agency. You know, and I told you the funny story when we went to visit a government office, and they said, "Oh, welcome, you're from ADRA. Is that the new government super agency for relief and development?" Well, in my mind, I was like, yes, it's God's super agency, right? It's amazing. And then you get the opportunity to share with, you know, them what we are and what we do and all that. And they were very pleased, you know, and I think we have such a beautiful relationship. Even right here in Alberta, I'll tell you, I personally know the NGO chair, and you know, we would try to promote that certificate, Dr. Dunkor, and they said they will span it out, but we have a good relationship right here in Alberta. So, like when they have the fires, we have a church that's already been trained and ready to deploy, and also open up their church for shelter and also for emergency kits and all that. So, what's amazing is that it's a united work. You have to network in this work, so you can see the many buzzwords that are involved in this community engagement and development. It's an intentional process, right? So when you take a look at that, you'll see, of course, the different social determinants of health. And having a background in public health is very helpful. It's been very helpful to me in development work. And as you can see, it's multifactorial. So there are many aspects. You're talking about education, access, and quality. So education is very important. Raising awareness, right? Helping people to understand what are the resources available to them, how they can access that, how they can be trained so to be disaster ready or to do community development work. Then you have healthcare access, you have neighborhood and the built environment. Another thing too is when you go into a certain environment, you look at the environment. Is the environment of such that it promotes or facilitates good health? When I was studying at Loma Linda, we conducted one of the largest projects in the largest county at the time. It's still the largest, one of the San Bernardino County. And in the United States, so it's very unique because the disparities that you see are very distinct, very glaring, very conspicuous. So you'll be on one side of the railroad and you'll see the affluence and the upper class, and you cross over the other side of the railroad or the train tracks, and it's like night and day. You think you're going to a different country. You leave first world to go to third world, right in the same county. And so we had a major project downtown San Bernardino, and that was to help people who were homeless, who were had low socioeconomic status, who were unemployed, who some were addicts and all that, to educate them onto taking charge of their health, and then of course helping to feed them. So we started this big community garden and all that. So long story short, it was amazing, but we had to go through do a windshield survey and identify what was available. So we saw that mostly corner stores, there was not proper health stores or options for them, very limited, so fast food and all these things, and then of course there were no green spaces to promote, you know, walking and all that. So it was a very different built environment. So this is why it's important when you go into your community. So we have Okotok, right? And then, of course, you look home, but you'll be moving. Whenever you go, you look for what the resources are, what's available, and you can tap into, you know, demographics. So you check in with the municipal office. You know, you have statistics and records. You can Google it. Of course, everything's online now. But you determine what the needs are, and then how can your ministry programs be tailored and customized to those needs, right? So that's really important. Social and community content. So what is already available? What's working? One of the things we do here in community development work is not to duplicate, right? Right? We try to look for gaps. How do we fill those gaps? So let me just open the floor. What is distinct, if you can share with me, what is distinct in your community? What's unique in your community? Just can you give us one line or one word? What have you discovered in your community that's unique in terms of a need or a gap? Just by example, for example. Anyone like to share? So far, where you're living. You're in Pinoco, you said?
Red Deer.
Red Deer, okay, yes.
More affordable local housing.
Pardon?
More affordable local housing.
Ah, okay, more affordable. Okay. Thank you. And let's also look at what are the existing needs. What do you see are the needs? Just at a glance.
The homeless are expanding.
Yes.
Well, how come that, like, more affordable housing and more homeless?
They were supposed to build affordable housing, but so far it hasn't come through, except for maybe a few units.
Yes.
But when you have 10 units that are available and 150 to 200 people that are homeless,
Yes.
it doesn't go very far.
No, it doesn't.
So we need, what we really need is to bring in no pricing. This is why we don't have what we need.
Yes.
Yeah.
Melina, remember we went recently to pay a visit? We went to Red Deer Soup Kitchen. So you know we have a ministry center there. You've been there? Amazing. They're doing a tremendous work. And you remember what they told us, Melina? What was the major needs? You remember? You want to kind of share with us?
Drug abuse.
Drug abuse, right? Yes. I heard that it has one of the highest fentanyl use rates and highest fentanyl usage.
Gang
violence. Red Deer. This is Red Deer. This is Red Deer, right? And it's not a major city, but it seems to concentrate in that area. And when we visited, it was amazing as the team was telling us the story, the impact they're making, the people coming in. It's not easy, but that is influence right there, right? Sometimes we're afraid to do that, but that is something that's unique to that community, right? It may be different in Calgary or, you know, in Tascoin or in Edmonton. So, you know, it's different. The needs are differ, but it's a common human need, right? There's common human needs. We got to identify. That's good. Anyone else? Yes, Jill.
I was just going to say that the need for my church is and for the people there is to be known. Like, we don't know that, and that's our next job, is to come out of ourselves. Because even when we were in Okotoks, we were kind of insular, and now it's time to come out and to have these people to be known.
So one idea is, you know, having like a health or family or food expo on your church property. So you might have, you know, maybe some nurses doing basic vitals and screening. We'll have different tables, we'll have exhibits, and you're right on the ground of the church, and it's like almost like a open house type of thing. Fear, and you could do it, Pastor Joe. Yes.
Is there a way that we can see in the community, in the internet or in the government agencies, that we can see, oh, this is in my community, for example, Millworks. Is there a way that we can go in any agency that says this is the pressing need of that community?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So there are, you just
go ahead.
If
we were to call the city hall, they do surveys.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be the one who initiate the survey.
Yeah.
They have sectors that will do that, and the information can be accessed. So if you're looking for something like that, make a call to the city hall, and they will provide you with information.
And they'll share the reports.
There's a group in Calgary, and they were talking about that they approached their city.
Yes.
They were surprised. All the information was there.
Yeah, and Bralina, they share the reports with us, right? So they're, I mean, the city, of course, taxpayer dollars, right? So of course, it's public access. You can request it, but usually they post it up, and you can see, okay, well, this group has, you know, this concentration, you know, even with the influx of, you know, refugees or coming in, let's say, from Ukraine or newcomers or whatever, they have, you know, they have updated statistics. You can also find out what the needs are, so you can say, okay, well, you know, the community is struggling with, even when you look at, they have combined reports, like police reports, you have social agency reports and all of that. So there are, all you need to do is just call or Google and you'll find it. You'll find it. The needs are there. And even part of the windshield surveys, even if you're walking, you're talking to people. You walk to businesses. You walk into, you know, people in the street and say, how are you doing? And how, you know, do you live here? And then you start this conversation, yeah, we live here, but it's changed over the last 10 years. We have more drug addicts in the park, you know, so you'll hear, so different sources. So you get the first hand, you get the, of course, the clean, sanitized, published copy, but you also hear on the ground too. So you can inform yourself with multiple, you know, avenues.
My sister made a good point about getting to know our community,
Yes.
getting to know us. And
Yes.
I don't know if we can elaborate a bit on that. Because most of our churches, we exist in the community, but we don't belong to the community at all.
Mercy.
We exist there,
Yes.
we are located there, we
Yes.
go there, but we have no clue. We don't belong to them.
Our highlight is our potluck.
That's right.
So-
solid point. Solid point. And how many of you agree with that? Isn't it true? Our churches tend to be very insular, very isolated. We are like almost like a private club, unfortunately. You know, within Adra, you know, I love my church, but we got to be also honest with our church. There's a subculture. So if you don't fit in, it's like, okay. So it's this almost exclusive, very exclusive, right? And we gotta break down those silos.
Because maybe the members of our churches are not living in the community. They are driving in to worship and then go.
That's a factor.
That's us.
That's another factor, yes, that's another factor. So we're not mixing and mingling,
No.
and we're not visible in the community. But you're right, we need to change that. I mean, we know it, we're aware of it, but what can we do? And this is where, I mean, I don't have all the answers. This is where we collectively speak and we share and we learn from each other. You know, it's called best practices and exchange. And I know more people want to be here to talk about this, but I think this is important. So what can we do? Well, baby steps, you know, take some bite-sized steps. So the first thing is, okay, get to know your community so you can have that fair, open up, so you can provide, you know, some plant-based meals, you can provide some free health screening, and you have some literature, you know, you can invite, you know, different, you know, ministries to be involved, right? Just like how we have the, you know, the resource tent, something like that, and you kind of people go around and check in and, hey, this is, you know, our church, we provide, you know, mental health counseling, we provide support group for grief, and these are things that you can do, right? So consider that. You know, we have to initiate sometimes, we can't expect people to come to us, but when they see the value that you and your church brings to the community, and you care, and you're offering, you're not charging them, of course there might be cost for certain programs, then, but apart from that, you know, it's a drawing card. Yes.
It really does work, because when I was, before Okotoks, I lived in Bentley, and I did start high blood pressure, diabetes, and those kinds of programs, and the community did respond. And it was just by putting out a little notice in the local newspaper.
That's wonderful. That's amazing. So it works. You're absolutely right. It does work. So, you know, our churches, we're trying to move into the direction of thinking of it becoming a center of influence. So when you think about your church, it's not just, of course, it meets the immediate needs of the members and all that, but also you have to have both an internal and external focus. So if we're only internally focused, then we are just meeting our needs within, and we're just, you know, kind of boxed in, we're just enclosed, and we're not being able to have the ability or not willing to think outside of the box. So there's something called faith or community-based organizations and also faith-based organizations. Some are affiliated and attached to churches, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So when we talk about non-for-profit, our churches have that charitable status, and it's a privilege that we do. You know, now there's a fine line with CRA, they're very strict. Of course, they audit and all that. But when we're offering services, what's amazing is that we can offer in a way where we can write, say, tax deductible. If some business or something gives a donation to the church, but it's specifically restricted for, you know, health or for, you know, disaster response or whatever it is, we have to honor that. But our church has that ability with the status it has. And of course, if we partner with another organization like Adra, then of course that even gives a little bit more credibility to it, because Adra is also charitable but also a registered NGO. And so that's where the strength of partnership comes in. So that's just what these slides are explaining. I'm not going to read it, but it's just giving you a big picture, because I want to get to the real heart of the matter here, so to speak, the crux. So what does your health or community-based program look like? Well, there's some guiding questions. Number one is, what are you trying to achieve? Is a question. What are you trying to achieve? If you don't know what you're trying to achieve, then it'll be an aimless project. Number two, how have you identified the felt and existing needs? And we just talked about that, right? So checking in with the city, Googling, doing a windshield survey, talking to members in the community, right? You are gathering sources of information. It's like doing research. You know, when you do your research, you've got to scour the market, you've got to scour the source, you've got to be able to identify where you can elicit the best information. Number three, who will be the target audience? That's a question. So who are you trying to reach? Is it homeless? Is it the addict? Is it children? Is it youth? Is it a combination of those? So you want to ensure that you know who you're targeting. So your program, your community program or project is laser focused. Okay. Number four, how will you deliver the program? Will it be at the church? Will it have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3? You see, and then of course the end goal. So you know, some projects are effective when you have different. You know, we have experienced project managers, right? Some projects take time to implement, right? And there are different cycles of the project, and that's important. And number five, of course, how will you measure the success or the impact of the project? So one thing is do a little just survey, short survey, 5, 7, 10 questions, right? And say, how did you find our service today? Did we meet your need? How can we improve? What would you like to see? Would you be interested in A, B, C, D? And you list some other services that you can offer your church. And then you gather that information. And then if you'd like to be on our mailing list or receive our free health newsletter, or you know, please leave your contact information there. Great. You've done amazing work. And you got to do it right at the beginning. You got to do it right at the onset. If you don't do it right, you lose. And I've seen our church do so much great work, but there's no follow-up. We lose the people through the cracks. We lose them and we don't know how to find them. But we have done great work. So it's not a matter of our church not doing good work. We do good work. To God be the glory. We do good work. And there's some churches that do good work, and they do so much good work, but they don't have these other important components to the process. So they miss out in really visibility, so advertising, promoting, or compiling, or storytelling, right? So gathering that information, being able to, you know, publish it or just get it out there in terms of sharing it, right? And letting people know. And if people don't know, then no, how will they know that, you know, you're doing anything? Or how would they want to give more? Or how would people be convinced that, okay, this church is doing something, we need to donate, or we need to give more to this program or project? So it's important we understand how you measure that success and impact, right? There's different levels of metrics. So you can do the survey, you can do a questionnaire, you can have them, of course, interview them, you know, and capture that through a short interview, video interview. So there's different ways you can do that. But you know why it's important? Because it lends to credibility. It shows that this program is effective and that people value what they're receiving. And that's important. And if your church can only focus on one or two things, it's better to take one thing and do it well than try to tackle too many things, or, you know. And you can grow the program where the program has different branches or arms as it develops, and as the needs, as you get to know what the needs are, the program then revolves around customizing your project or program along those needs. Comments or questions on that? Sounds straightforward, right? Not straightforward, not too difficult. So let's go to what we do here. So really quickly on the Adra component, just to give you an overview. So we do emergency and of course development work. There's community and government and NGO partnerships. There's the education component, which is big. Advocacy and education, raising that awareness, and then it's really volunteer based, as we talked about, right? Each of you are members. You're part of Adra because it's part of our church. And all of our volunteers are members of our church. The only people that are paid are staff who are employed. But the groundwork, at the ground level, it's each of you and your fellow members who are volunteers, who are trained, who identified, right? And of course, it's self-sustained. So as you told you the history, I don't want to repeat myself, but if you remember, we talked about when Adra was established and how it came about. And of course, it's at an arm's length, so it has its own governance. While it's part of the church, it has its own governance and operating structure. And that has been helpful to manage projects, to receive funds from government, and to have that accounting component and reporting mechanism that helps to keep its sterling reputation. So it was established in 1969 and very active in the United States. If you remember, it was SAWS, remember that? SAWS, Social and Welfare Services, Seventh Adventist Church, and then it morphed into Adra Adventist, what is it again?
Adventist Development and Relief.
Yeah. You'd be surprised to know how many people create new
Words?
Yeah, they create new words and all. But it's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but you need to know it. But it's nice. A lot of them are related. So instead of development, some will say disaster, and then some said development and refugee. So we just got to make sure what you're talking about. It started with FEMA. So FEMA is in the U.S., the Federal Emergency Management Administration. That's a federal government administration. And of course, they have an agreement here in Canada. We have an agreement with, of course, the federal government, so Global Affairs Canada and Public Safety Canada. So we are registered with them. In the U.S., it's very big. They have the whole volunteer association. We have what we call NGO councils. So right in Alberta, we're part of the Alberta NGO Council. And then, of course, in Canada, we said it was established, remember, in 1985. Who was the person that established it, do you remember?
John Howard.
Yes, that's right, Pastor John Howard. And it was adjusted for the Canadian context. And now, as I said, we're members of all these NGO councils and also part of the national consortium. So I believe that our church, God has blessed our church to be in circles where we can exert an influence in many ways. And I think one of the great strengths is leveraging the strengths of all of our church entities. That's really important. That's very important. So, what do we offer? So, you've seen this. Go ahead, yes.
Just for information, Adra originated from this province.
That's right. Thank you very much. Because Dr. John Howard Pastor John Howard was here. He was a pastor, and then he felt that call, and that's right. So, Alberta is very significant. Very important right here. The origins.
On the previous screen, so I have a question. Adra was established in the US in 1969. What was there before?
The SAWS, the social.
When does ACS come into the picture? So
ACS 50 years ago, last year. So if we do the math, that would bring us to what? 60, wait, let me see now. 68 around there, right? So 70, 30, and 22. So yeah, so around 1970. So they were established around the same time, but ACS's mandate was to work within the United States, not international. So they were a national organization, and Adra was established as an international humanitarian agency. And that created that's interesting, was because ACS is from the North American division, and we are part of the North American division. And thank you for bringing that up. And just to say that there are unique strengths that ACS brings. In Canada, Adra is the go-to humanitarian armed agency. But in the United States, ACS is the go-to because they have the agreement with FEMA. And we have here in Canada the agreement with our government. So it's different. But however, we partner together. So there are things that ACS does and has established over time. They're very well known for their emotional crisis care. They're well known for their in-kind donation, warehousing, and management program. So we have trained with, alongside, integrated some of that training into the work at Adra. But it's unique that, yes, we operate under the umbrella of Adra here in Canada. That's important. Thank you for that distinction. And that's important to know. But this is the thing about our church. Our church has so many unique ministries. Why do we operate many times like in silos? Why is it, okay, this ministry here, that ministry? What if we came together? What if we pull those resources together? While we have unique objectives for each of our ministries, and that's absolutely, it's important that we also look at how can we bring this together. And I think that is one of the, what shall we say, one of the greatest assets that we have, or even potential untapped. Well, we try our best, but we can do better. Imagine if we were able to, and that's one of the reasons why one of the things is that we wanted to partner with churches, conferences, our institutions, like Berman, and like It Is Written, right? And all these institutions, because we're all doing ministry, and it's very important ministry. And while we have our very specific target objectives, we can still find ways to partner, right, together. And then that's really bringing it to the next level. So some of the things that we do, of course, is community support. And then, so the whole presentation today is community development and engagement, being intentional about what we do in the community, local and national, and indigenous communities. And these are real pictures of projects here. So this one at the top here, this was when we went to the largest freshwater island in Canada. You know where that is? The largest freshwater island.
This freshwater what?
Largest freshwater, yeah. It's in Ontario. It's called Manitoulin Island.
Manitoulin Island,
yeah. Yeah, Manitoulin Island.
Been there once.
Been there once? Okay, yeah. So they have a very large First Nation community, and we've been working with them for the last 7 years through youth education, through food programs. Amazing, just amazing. And they have a program called the Outdoor Adventure Learning Experience. 10 days, where they take students from high school and they take them on a land-based tour, which includes some land-based therapy to orient them to their culture. And they go portaging and canoeing on the different sites. And what's amazing is that those that come from that, who graduate from that program, over 90, I think over 75 or 80% of them go on to higher education, college, university. Right here in Alberta, as you know, there's the Mamamaway Toscoton Native School. Amazing ministry what they're doing. So I'm so grateful for our church that we're able to engage with First Nation Indigenous communities. And I told you the story about our different projects before. Yes, Pastor Joe?
There are some churches who really want to start some ministries, especially in Indigenous people.
Yes.
My question is, how many percent that the Adra can support in terms of the project for like financial support?
Well, that depends on the criteria. So it depends on the project, depending on what the needs are. So Adra, we can't take on every project because we're limited, but we look at partnership with our conferences. We review what are the top needs, and then when we have done the proper consultation, then we, affirm and we can confirm the projects and all that. There's a lot of good things happening, but there's only so much we can do. But that's something that you can explore, and then of course we have for the Enoch here, we can talk more offline on that.
So is there like a percentage that you can have in the Adra department with the church?
A presentation?
No, the percentage of support of financial.
Oh, percentage. Well, again, it all depends on what's determined by the conference, right? So we'll have to determine that. But we partnered with. We got some funding from remember for Edmonton Filipino, and also we did a project up in the
West
Paul First Nation.
Yeah.
But a church can execute more than one project if it is capable, if it has the ability, and if it has a value. So you can put a number that it has to be one. It's based upon the need of
Yes.
the community. So
Based on
if
the
one
needs.
church has done their due diligence and they have two good projects, you can't say, oh no, we are not going to fund them because we have to do that with somebody else. So it depends. If you want to talk about it more, give me a call.
Yeah, let's explore it. I know you want to do more, and I think that's important. And I think, yeah, you want to ask something?
Yeah, I was just going to add that if there's Adventists in the community that the conference knows about it, like I had a private counseling practice at one time, and they hired us to go to Obina, which it was called back then, to do a project for GED students, to do a course on raising your self-esteem. And we went up there for several weeks and had really interesting classes and small groups up there. So it was really
kind of like outsourced to services.
So they knew us. They knew we were Adventists, but we were private practice in the community.
Yes, and that's another way where we can outsource or take some of the talent we have and use it in another community that doesn't have that, right? The gap, right? But there's a lot to be done. But again, we could talk more offline and see how we can look at the criteria and build a program, a ministry program, ministry project. So again here, it includes volunteers which are members of the church, but we also offer free training. Yes, Doc?
So I have a question on the volunteers.
Yes.
How do you identify volunteers in the local churches? How do you train them and sustain them? I'm asking this because in Lacombe we have two churches, right?
Yes.
The community church, there's this older man, I forgot his name.
Okay.
Some old fellow. He's very, very active. Anytime I go to that church, he's promoting iron.
Really?
Yes. But in the college church, which is big,
It's huge.
have you never heard about and ranking?
Oh.
It's like a welcome of Adra.
Yeah, he's an advocate, really.
He goes up there, very happy. So, what's happening? How do you do it? How do you select them, train them, and sustain them? We keep on talking about volunteers. But I don't see it.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you, Doc, for that. Brother Enoch, what do you think? See, we have a volunteer management program. So what we do is we fan out. So we make the appeal. We have, would you like to be a volunteer? And then we offer the training. So we ask our churches, or we ask our church ambassadors, Adra ambassadors, if and even coming to camp meeting, we're asking if those would like to sign up to be volunteer. Once they sign up, we have a database. And then each church usually has an Adra ambassador. That ambassador will kind of help us to coordinate the volunteers and then information of what's happening at Adra, how you can be involved. We have a camp response. We have a campaign appeal for the Ukraine. We have something for the wildfires in Canada. So what happens is when we have that list, they get being informed, number one. Number two, we say, okay, we're offering training at this date. Who's available for disaster emergency response, for cultural sensitivity, and all that. And then they sign up and they sign a volunteer agreement so that then we keep a database working with the local conference and church. And then if there's a crisis or a need, we say, okay, who's available to deploy to volunteer? So, for example, in BC when they had the wildfires, we had trained volunteers. The conference coordinators, in this case, of course, if it's Alberta, would be Brother Enoch. He's supposed to have a list of volunteers, and then when there was the fires, we had the operation, we called upon the volunteers. So several churches had a schedule, and they said, okay, we can help out this week, this day, and then we continue to communicate with them. So we don't have ambassadors in every church. So it's an ongoing, it's a challenge, work in progress. And you will have those that are strong advocates, and then you'll have those like College Heights. We have someone, but it's not as visible. I mean, we're doing that community garden, so remember it, right? It was right between, across from the gym there, just below the cafeteria. Beautiful, but we need to strengthen that for sure. So there's room for improvement. But we do have a volunteer program management, like a database where we do train and build up our volunteers. And the volunteers are busy, right? So, we try our best to engage with them, and we got to do better. We're working on some things. But you want to add anything to it?
No, just it's not one area that we have to spend more time.
Yes, yes.
We are trying to coordinate the ambassadors in the province, and it's still a work in progress. So we have to start from somewhere so it can that's something that we have.
But you know what I do find though? If members are engaged or asked to be involved, they want to. If there is a crisis, a disaster, or loss, and we've had even volunteers who are not trained, but they're willing to help out. So we know that there are members who want to help. It's just now making sure that it is a coordinated process and they're trained, because there's another thing. If they represent the church is one thing, if they represent the church through Adra, it's another thing, because what if they say something? What if they do some in action and the media catches that, or that goes on social media or whatever, and it says, oh, this volunteer, he said that we don't serve, or we don't, accept LGBT. Oh, and that can be right. So that's why the training is very important, so that when they're not supposed to speak on behalf of, but if they should say anything, they know what their limitations are, their scope of practice, and then of course they're vetted, so they're screened, and we know that, especially as it relates to criminal record and volunteer screening for anything like that, or child issues and abuse. So we got to make sure that our volunteers are wonderful members, but they're people who have a life, and we got to make sure that they're safe to operate in that environment, especially if you're working with vulnerable groups like children and elderly and women, etc. Right? So we have to take the necessary precautions. So great question on that, volunteers. But still working on it. But our strength that we do the work, our volunteers in countries outside of Canada, we have volunteers, but we also have paid staff. So if we're doing a project, which we have right now in several countries around the world, in Africa, in Sudan, and Niger, and in fact, there are no churches in certain countries, especially Muslim countries, as you know, Sudan, Niger, Yemen. But we have a presence there. Adra has a presence there. So we employ local people, but also there's some volunteers from the community. They're also trained under that Adra umbrella structure. So they know that even though they're not Adventists, but they know the principles and the values that we espouse to ensure that of course they are in harmony when they operate in alignment with those. So it's amazing that the training is so important. We go forward. Thank you for those questions. So, we offer the in-kind donation management, as I told you before, receiving, warehousing, which includes triaging, storage, and shipping, and of course distribution. So that's what we did in BC, as you know, British Columbia, for the wildfires. And that is a training that came from ACS. So Adra does that, and that's important to know. We also, provide psychological first aid, crisis care, psychosocial support, which we talked about, and that's one unique thing our church can offer, because we have our pastors, we have our chaplains, we have health professionals, and so they want to be involved, and so there are ways we can get them involved through this. DER training for our volunteers, disaster emergency response training, and when we talk about education, that's why we really wanted to push that. We were pushing and promoting, and reached out to Berman to do that joint certificate. The certificate is an entry-level certificate, and I want to say thank you again, Doc, for supporting that and making that happen. We want to encourage members and young people. You don't have to be full time. It's an online, 1-year online certificate, and if you want to have more skills in what humanitarian work is about and have a unique perspective, that is a great entry-level training certificate, a specialized certificate. And so we want to encourage you to keep that in mind. And part of that is training, because if we're not equipped, then we won't be able to function effectively.
It's not free, right? It's not free.
It's not free. But, there might be some incentives and scholarships and all that, but please check it out. It's a good thing. A good thing to have. We should promote that to more of our pastors and here who want to be involved, and to our members, because it's very, very good skill. It's a basic, it's basic, but it's also unique specialty. It's a specialized certificate. So you're going to get perspectives and understanding how to operate in the context of the humanitarian sector.
Should be recommended as one of the electives for the pastors.
So, is it free?
No.
No, it's not free, but that's a good one. And that would be interesting. Would be one of the electives for pastors training in a theology program.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Humanitarian ministry, or that's important. That's a good thing, because when we send our pastors out, they're in a community where anything can happen, crisis, disaster, and if they're not equipped or prepared, that's a good one. That's a good one. That would be a popular one if we could include it somehow, possibly. At least 1 or 2 courses, or maybe a minor concentration or specialization in that area. That's interesting. And there's a theology behind that as well. So thank you for that, Pastor Joe. Appreciate that. One of the big things we can maximize or capitalize on is psychosocial support and crisis care. When we talk about community engagement and development, that's a strength our church has. And we need to capitalize on more. So that includes what we call CISM, critical incident stress management, emotional counseling. You said you were a counselor, Gail, or you have some excellent. We can, if you have those skill sets in your local church, let's bring our social workers and counselors together, right? And because our members a lot of our members are professionals, or they have some type of professional skill in some way, or if not, or a practical skill, and we can be able to pool those resources together. Non-denominational, so we're not just focusing on our church exclusively, but also the community at large, on a wider scale. Trained pastoral chaplain staff, we have them. Our churches are loaded, and I think that we can do more, and we can train those who need the advanced training. And of course, serious cases refer to more advanced professionals. So we know that if we're offering something to the community, it's more acute, it's more short term. If someone really has trauma, deep trauma, they have addiction, you're dealing with folks from the First Nations that are coming in with intergenerational trauma. We are like just a front line, so we will help them if there's a fire, and so that's short term to make them feel safe, but then from there they may need referrals to more long-term counseling, deeper counseling, right? So our church is like, that first step, right? That engagement piece, that first responder piece, so to speak, in that respect. And then the long-term community support through church network. So ongoing programs. We have support group. We have our, we have our health education program, right? And all of these things our church can do to ensure that we are engaging. But specifically, when we talk about community engagement, it's intentional. And you look at what your church can offer, and based on the needs of that community, you focus on that. What do we have? Well, we have at Adra administrative and logistical support, so technical support. And then, of course, we're working with our conference Adra representatives who, of course, may have advanced training as well. And in this case, we do have one here in Alberta, Radina, who has that advanced training and experience in the field. Churches with volunteer members across the country with specialist skills. So we're talking about, so we also have our volunteers, and we have our general volunteers, and we have volunteers that identify certain skill sets. Some are carpenters, some are plumbers, electricians. It's good to know that. Very important to know that. We actually had a group of skilled volunteers that went to in British Columbia, one of the little towns. Was devastated by the flooding. There's fires, and then they had a flood. And we took our volunteers from 2 churches and some of our carpenters, and they rebuilt 10, we safe-proofed and rebuilt 10 homes, especially for the seniors, and also those who had a disability. It was an amazing experience. They volunteered their time. 10 homes got rebuilt. It's amazing. They were access that. Ongoing training for volunteers in disaster emergency response, so we keep that database volunteers updated using what we call the incident management or incident management system. In the US it's called ICS, incident critical system, and then trailers. So we have a trailer in Alberta. It's not used a whole lot, right? But it is right. It's in a conference office in Alberta. But we've used it for Fort McMurray and for transporting items and all that when needed. And I think if here, just let you know, you can have access as churches to this trailer. So if something's happening in your community or in your district, you can request for the trailer can stock items, you can use it, I think there's a door or drawbridge at the back, you can use it as a place not only to store, but to serve as well, to some extent. So yes, just remember that, that's a resource for you here in the Alberta Conference. Keep that in mind. And of course, we work with health ministries, of course. So you know, our church has all these ministries, and health ministry is a big thing because especially dealing with crisis, disaster, community development, also has to do with health components, and strong health, factor that's there, and it's all community-based. So you use health ministries in a community-based program, and that's important because at the end of the day, right, we want to improve the quality of people's lives. So I'm talking from a development perspective, not so much emergency. Yes?
I was just going to add that there's psychological techniques like EMDR, and that group has a disaster training also for doing EMDR, and they'll just call you and send you to wherever it is because it's really effective.
Yes, absolutely. Especially when there's trauma, right? And crisis, PTSD, etc. For sure. One of my first missions or emergency response was up in northern Ontario, and there was a big dam that broke, and they had major evacuation. We had a health education program with them long before too, because the community had diabetes and obesity and cardiovascular disease, and so we talked about that. We're able to have a health education program, so training, cooking classes, nutritional intervention, and that would be helpful. But then they had this big crisis here, and I had the privilege to go up there, travel, and actually to organize a team and deploy a team up there. And you can see here we have the Canadian Rangers, which are a part of the military that train Indigenous people for service to their communities all across Canada. And there is a fellow shaking hand with his name he's a deputy chief for his community, and it was amazing. So they evacuated over 400 people, and then we had a small team, and it went up there in October, and it's cold, it's freezing, it's ice, it's October. You have to wear your hat and everything, it's snowing, and oh my, that's way up, right? So these are flying-only communities going up to, on the level of where the James Bay, Hudson Bay, that area there, it's just amazing. But what it was is that because we developed a community presence, relationship with them before, they literally gave us the key to the community. And they said, come anytime, because we thank you for serving us, we trust you. And within 2 weeks after the work we did, the chief announced that the community is safe and we can repatriate our residents back home. So what was amazing is that I want you to, if you forget anything, don't forget this. It's all about establishing strong or healthy relationship with your community, building that trust. When they trust you, they open the doors of their hearts, their homes, their community to you. And that is powerful, especially in these last days in which we're living in. We know things are going to change. We know that religious liberties will be subverted and restricted when they say, hey, you know what? I know that church, I know that member. They're amazing. They helped us in a time of crisis. You know what? No matter what you do, they will stand up. They will vouch for you. They will advocate. And you don't have to do it yourself. So I think it's very intentional. Firstly, because the love of Christ constrains us to help. But we think about what's going to happen, potential implications in the future. This is where we need to go. And this is what we need to do. Ensure that we are being agents of change in our community. We are being the light and the love of God in our community. So really quickly, as we get ready to land the plane, there's a list of projects that Adra is engaged in overall. So you'll see it's many sectors: food security, water and sanitation, hygiene, health, that's called WASH, health and nutrition protection, reproductive health, sex education, and Adra responds to many of these, especially internationally, but also we're building up our national presence here, and then we're also looking at
what's WASH?
WASH is water and sanitation hygiene project. Remember that one? Really not? It's WASH project. It's a popular one used in the humanitarian work. All right. So so there's a list of ideas, and some things are contextual. So this may not fit in your community, but some things can be, or you can actually take it and customize it and make it work, as you can see. So, since we're not taking breaks, we're going to get right to the last few slides. So research study findings found this, that FBOs, faith-based organizations, and so our church are faith-based, right? And health professions for the purpose of evaluating health activities and disseminating findings. There is an increased collaboration with faith-based organizations. In fact, the government in that consortium that we're a part of has called upon faith-based organizations. When you think about the NGOs, Adra, Samaritan's Purse, you think about Salvation Army, Lutheran World Mission.
Red Cross.
Red Cross is not so much religious affiliated. They're more of a, they were founded, but you know, someone said, okay, the Red Cross, they got it from Calvary, right? But you know, they try to, you know, so it was a medical doctor who, of course, was treating patients who were wounded, and so he used the Red Cross to identify, you know, those that were wounded and who were worked on. And there might have been, I think there was a religious affiliation, but they secularized it. So, but most of the NGOs are faith-based, right? So the government recognizes the value that faith-based organizations, so there's a strong collaboration here. Oops, let me go back here. And of course, oops, go back here. And of course, it's more known about the effectiveness of faith-based programs than either faith-based or collaborative programs. So there is a disproportionate percentage here. But faith-based organizations have shown the value of the impact and the relationship they have with the community, and that's why it's important. So they found that 55% of programs testing interventions were faith-based, 20% were faith-based, 25% were collaborative. So what they're saying is essentially, in a nutshell, the strength of faith-based organizations and the impact they're making in their communities. That's essential, what they're saying here. Up to 70% of congregations are involved in health activities. So community engagement that involves health, right? And as you can see here, the research essentially shows, I'm not going to read it, is that faith-based organizations are changing the game. That's what it's showing, essentially. So as a church, that's who we are. And since faith-based organizations and churches are familiar, community-based institutions, they frequently succeed when outside health professionals cannot, because they trust. See? They trust. And that's where our church comes in. So when we develop a relationship, guess what? It goes a long way in changing. So, as you can see here, what are some stages of the community development program? Number one, community analysis. So you do a needs assessment, the windshield survey. Number two, design and initiate. So you're designing a program, customizing it based on the needs of what? Your community. Number three, that's when you take now the program that you have designed. Now you're going to implement it, put it into action. After that, you want to maintain, consolidate your resources. Then, of course, you're going to also, in this phase here, number 5, you're going to disseminate and reassess. That includes some evaluation. So you're going to evaluate how successful your project was, as we talked about, right? So that's essentially the 5 major kind of steps or kind of cycle of a successful community development work or cycle. Keep that in mind. And we have some resources. If you want, please leave me your email and I'll send that to you. So as we get ready here to land the plane, just keep this in mind here. There's 3 things that I want to remind you of in these not-for-profit. And community programs doesn't have to be necessarily health-based, but we're using health as a entering wedge, as opening the door. So there's criteria. Does your project align with the mission criteria of your not-for-profit organization or your faith-based organization? So that's criteria. We talk about why we're doing it. There's got to be a reason why, right? Then the second one, C, the second C is collaboration. So you have criteria, you have collaboration. Is there a synergy and a sense of unified direction? And thirdly, community, right? Are we creating cohesion, building capacity, and a sustainable program to meet the diverse needs and empower the community we serve? So criteria, collaboration, and community. C-cubed. Remember that, C-cubed. What does it look like? Well, we got to move from, this is process-centered and person-centered. So process-centered deals with policy, plans, programs, projects, and goals. Person-centered focuses on being informed by the people, for the people, with the people. So which one is more of a community-based approach? Which one would you say? Right. And now, is process important? Yes, right? But if we only focus on process-centered, figure out people-centered, our projects will become just, very sterile. So program-based here, look at the progressive flow from left to right. Program-based is where you plan, deliver, knowledge, and empowerment. Then you move to project-based, which is plan, implement, and monitor, and evaluate the results. And then finally, you have people-based, which is plan, participate, involve, impact, and transformative. So program-based, project-based, and then people-based. So that are the major components of a successful community intervention program, including these elements. Very important. So once you understand it in your mind, then you know the direction that you can go. And that's going to be critical. Okay? So the last few slides here. This is from, of course, Testimonies to the Church. Study how you can best help those who take no interest in religious things. As you visit your friends and neighbors, show an interest in what? In their spiritual as well as their temporal welfare. Present Christ as a sin-pardoning Savior. That's after you develop that relationship with them. Invite your neighbors to your home. Read with them from the precious Bible. That's after you establish a relationship with them. From books that explain truths. This united with simple songs for prayers. This is kind of like that connection at the next level when you get to that community trust. When people say, okay, so why do you do this? What motivates you to do this? That's where you can begin to share your faith. And that's an important component. We're talking about creating wholeness. So in our churches, is our goal to bring the healing presence of God to that community? I believe so. And whatever ministry, project we engage in, it's not only meeting temporal needs, but hopefully we are bringing wholeness, peace, and creating a healthy community. That's what we want to strive for. Wherever Jesus went, that's what he did. Jesus was like the living, active, breathing program and project. Wherever he went, he made a difference. He brought healing, restoration, cohesion. He built community. When we think about what we do, we should also follow in the same footsteps. We look at these pictures and we see Jesus creating wholeness, bringing people together. As a church, when we bring people together, when we engage in community wellness, wholeness, our projects need to have, without that component, our project lacks the luster. So when we plan, when we pray, when we implement, may your ministry projects in the community may be Christ-centered, but also may have the intention to bring wholeness and healing and restoration to the community. And that will make the project of lasting value, enduring legacy. When you do something once, remember this, we're not just doing it once, we're doing it to build a relationship and for it to be ongoing and sustainable. And that's the key of the work we do in Adra and for our communities, in our churches. That is the lasting legacy that we leave when we can say, you know what, I want to thank, when the members come and say, I want to thank you for what you did, because no one has responded or showed us such care and love. That goes a long way. So I want to encourage you to engage intentionally and not by accident. And whatever you do, remember, when you place it in God's hands, he always multiplies and blesses it. Any comments or final questions or final comments? So, may what we do be transformational, because that is what we're called to do. And if it's just, okay, well, I'll just feed you, for the day, as they say. If you give someone, as they say, the saying goes, you give someone, a man or woman, a fish, you feed them for a day, you teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. So that is the impact and the added value that we can bring to our communities.
Lead them to the fish hall.
Pardon?
Lead them to the fish hall.
Ah, yes.
And then get to fish in the time.
Amen. Amen. Well, let's have a prayer and we'll close off our hesitation. Loving Heavenly Father, thank you for the time that we can share. May some ideas have been sparked in our minds, O Lord, something that we can take away with, to go back to our communities, and even those who are not here but who will view this recording, that there is something that they can take away with them to continue to do the great work they're doing in their respective communities, so that we can be your hands, your feet, your mouthpiece, your instruments of grace, of healing, ultimately to point